Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Succinct Psychology, or as we like to call it, Succinct. My name is Jaia Hendrickson, and today I'm going to be starting out Chapter 4 in Principles of Social Psychology. Now, again, I want to reiterate that these slides have been pulled from the University of Minnesota libraries, and they have been edited for presentational purposes. Alright, so Chapter 4 is going to revolve around the self. And some of the topics we're going to be covering in this chapter are going to be the cognitive self, so the self-concept, the feeling self, so self-esteem, and the social self, so the role of the social situation. The self-concept is a knowledge representation that contains knowledge about us, including our beliefs about our personality traits, our physical characteristics, our abilities, our values, our goals, our roles, as well as our knowledge that we exist as individuals. Throughout childhood and adolescence, the self-concept becomes more abstract and complex, and is organized into a variety of cognitive aspects, different cognitive aspects, known as self-schemas. Children have self-schemas about their progress in school, their appearance, their abilities on sports and other activities, and many other aspects. And these self-schemas help direct and inform their processing of self-relevant information. And by the time we're adults, our sense of self has grown dramatically. In addition to possessing a wide variety of self-schemas, we can analyze our thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and we can see that other people may have different thoughts than we do. Now, although every human being has a complex self-concept, there are nonetheless individual differences in self-complexity. And self-complexity is the extent to which individuals may have many different and relatively independent ways of thinking about themselves. Research has found that some people have more complex selves than others do, and that having a variety of self-schemas is useful because the various aspects of the self help us to improve our responses to the events that we experience. Researchers also found that compared to people with low self-complexity, those with higher self-complexity experience more positive outcomes. People with more complex self-concepts have been found to have lower levels of stress and illness, a greater tolerance for frustration, and they have more positive and less negative outviews on events that they experience. And the self-reference effect refers to when information that's processed in relationship to the self is particularly well remembered. And so this is powerful evidence that the self-concept helps us to organize and remember information. In one classic study that demonstrated the importance of the self-schema, Rogers, Kuiper, and Kirker conducted an experiment to assess how college students recalled information that they learned under different processing conditions. So all the participants were presented with the same list of 40 adjectives, but through the use of random assignment, each participant was given one of 4 directions about how they were going to process the adjectives. So participants assigned to the structural task condition were asked to judge whether the words were printed in uppercase or lowercase letters. Participants in the phonemic task condition were asked whether or not the word rhymed with another given word. And in the semantic task condition, the participants were asked if the word was a synonym of another word. And in the final condition, the self-reference task condition, participants indicated whether or not the given adjective was or was not true of themselves. And after completing the specified task, each participant was asked to recall as many adjectives as they could remember. So we see here in the chart, those at the structural remembered the least amount. So those who were asked if the word was printed in lowercase or uppercase, they remembered the least amount of words. Those within the phonemic group didn't remember much more than the structural either, and those were words that rhymed with another word. Those within the semantic were a bit higher than the phonemic if those words were a synonym of another word. And then we see finally the self-reference group was considerably larger than all of the other groups, and that's when they just thought if the words related to them or didn't relate to them, and so they were able to remember the words better. And so this kind of really shows that self-schemas and the self-reference effect are powerful. So like any other schema, self-concept can vary in its cognitive accessibility. Self-awareness refers to the extent to which we are currently fixed, our attention is currently fixed on our own self-concept. So, and when the self-concept becomes highly accessible because we have concerns about being observed and potentially judged by others, we experience a publicly induced self-awareness known as self-consciousness. And not all aspects of our self-concepts are equally accessible at all times. And these long-term differences in accessibility of the different self-schemas help to create individual differences. For instance, in terms of our current concerns and interests. And a phenomenon related to self-awareness is when people are in large crowds, such as in mass demonstrations or riots, they become so much a part of the group that they lose their individual self-awareness and they experience de-individuation. And de-individuation is the loss of self-awareness and individual accountability in groups. Alright, two particular types of individual differences in self-awareness that have been found to be important, and they relate to self-concern and other concern that we've discussed in prior chapters, are private self-consciousness, which refers to the tendency to introspect about our inner feelings and thoughts. And people who are high on private self-consciousness are likely to base their behavior on their own inner beliefs and values. They let their inner thoughts and feelings guide their actions. And they may be particularly likely to strive to succeed in dimensions that allow them to demonstrate their own personal accomplishments. Now, public self-consciousness, in contrast, which relates to other concern, refers to the tendency to focus on our outer public image and to be particularly aware of the extent to which we are reaching the standards that people have set for us. Research has found that there are cultural differences in public self-consciousness, such that people from East Asian cultures, East Asian collectivist cultures, have higher public self-consciousness in comparison to their Western individualist counterparts. So, in a study conducted by Steve Hine and his colleagues, they found that when students from Canada, which is a Western culture, were asked to fill out a questionnaire, and when they were placed in front of a mirror, they found that they were more self-critical and they were less likely to cheat when they had the mirror in front of them, in comparison to the Canadian students who didn't have a mirror in front of them. However, when they did the same experiment with Japanese students who are part of a collectivist East Asian culture, they found that it didn't have the same effect. So this person-situation interaction is consistent with the idea that people from East Asian cultures have higher public self-consciousness, and in comparison to the people from Western cultures. So the mirror effect did not have the same effect on the Japanese students as it did for the Canadian students. Alright folks, we're going to end the video here before I run on for too long, but I hope you enjoyed that first intro into Chapter 4 in Principles of Social Psychology covering the self, and I hope to see you guys next time.